Work nights 4 days a week, and I've been doing it for going on 11 years now. That's the thing people don't understand when I tell this story. They hear it and they think, how did you not notice? And I get it. I would have thought the same thing. But when you work nights, your relationship with your own house is strange. You sleep when the world is awake. You're up when everything's dark and quiet. You move through your own rooms like a ghost. And after enough years of that, you stop really seeing the place. You just pass through it. My name's not important. What matters is that I'm 53 years old, I live in a house I've owned for 14 years in a suburb outside Columbus, Ohio, and for the past 11 of those years, I've worked the overnight shift at a water treatment facility. 4 nights on, 3 nights off. I get home around 6:30 in the morning. I eat something, I'm asleep by 8. I'm up around 3 or 4 in the afternoon. My 3 days off are the only time I live like a normal person, and even then, my body never fully adjusts. My wife passed 6 years ago. Breast cancer. We'd been together 22 years. After she was gone, the house got quieter in a way that's hard to explain. Not peaceful quiet, just empty quiet. My daughter's out in Portland now with her husband. My son's down in Atlanta. They call, we talk, they visit at Christmas. I'm not complaining. That's just how it is when your kids grow up and the world pulls them in different directions. The point is, I live alone, and I'm gone 4 nights out of every 7. The call that changed things came on a Tuesday afternoon last March. Not a call, actually. A text from my next-door neighbor, a retired schoolteacher in her late 60s, who I'd always gotten along with just fine. She'd been the one to bring food over after my wife's funeral. Good people. We'd wave across the driveway, chat about the weather, that kind of thing. Her text said, "Hey, wanted to check. Did you get a roommate or something? There've been cars in your driveway a lot lately. Didn't want to be nosy, but it's been a few weeks." I read it 3 times. I didn't have a roommate. I hadn't had anyone staying with me. I hadn't even had a guest overnight since my son visited back in October. I called her back instead of texting. She picked up on the second ring. She said she'd noticed it maybe 5 or 6 weeks back. A car, sometimes 2, parked in my driveway on weekend nights. Lights on inside. She'd assumed I'd started having company over. Maybe a girlfriend, maybe a relative staying for a while. She didn't want to pry. But then last Saturday, she'd been up early, around 5:30 in the morning, and she'd seen 2 people she didn't recognize come out my front door, get in a car, and drive away. That's when she decided to say something. I thanked her. I told her I'd look into it. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after I hung up. Had someone broken in? Were they still coming back? How had they gotten in to begin with? I hadn't given anyone a key. Not a single person. After my wife passed, I'd changed the locks, actually, just as part of settling into a new kind of life in the house. New locks, new deadbolt. I had 2 keys, one on my keychain, one hanging on a hook inside my kitchen cabinet. I went and looked at the hook. The key was there. That almost made it worse somehow. I walked through the house slowly, the way you do when you're looking for something, but you're not sure what. The living room looked fine at first. But then I noticed the throw blanket on the armchair was folded differently. I know that sounds insane. I know how it sounds. But I have a specific way I leave that blanket. I sort of toss it over the arm of the chair in a loose bunch, and it was folded neatly, laid across the seat cushion, like someone had tidied up. I stood there and just stared at it. In the kitchen, the dish rack had 2 mugs in it that I didn't remember washing. I live alone. I use 1 mug in the morning, and I almost never leave it in the rack. I put it in the cabinet. There were 2 mugs in that rack, both rinsed clean, both facing down the way you'd set them to dry. I opened the refrigerator. On the second shelf, behind my orange juice, there was a 6-pack of a craft beer I'd never bought, 2 cans missing from it, and on the bottom shelf, a takeout container from a Thai place. I don't eat Thai food. My wife used to love it. After she died, I just never went back. I closed the refrigerator door and I stood in my kitchen and I didn't know what to feel. It wasn't fear exactly. It was something stranger than fear. It was the feeling of realizing that the place you thought was yours, the one place in the world that was definitively, completely yours, had been shared without your knowledge. that someone had been moving through it, sitting in it, eating in it, sleeping in it maybe. I went upstairs, the guest room, second door on the right, the one my kids use when they visit. The bed was made. I never make that bed between visits. There's no point. But it was made, tucked tight at the corners, both pillows stacked neatly against the headboard, on the nightstand, a phone charger that wasn't mine. One of those braided ones with a USB-C end. I unplugged it and held it in my hand. Somebody had been sleeping in my guest room. Somebody had been sleeping in my house, in my guest room, while I worked the night shift 4 days a week, 11 years running, and I had not known. I didn't call the police right away. Looking back, I'm not sure why. Shock, maybe. Or the strange paralysis that comes when something is so far outside your expectations that your brain just refuses to process it at full speed. I sat on the edge of the guest bed and I thought about the last 5 or 6 weeks. Had I noticed anything, any small thing I'd dismissed? And here's the part that haunts me a little even now, yes. I had. I'd thought I'd left my porch light on one night and come home to find it off. I'd thought the couch cushions were in a different order than I'd left them. I'd sniffed something in the upstairs hallway, a faint smell like a different shampoo or a different laundry detergent. And I just figured it was coming from outside, from a neighbor's dryer vent. I had noticed things. I had just explained every single one of them away. When you live alone and you work nights, you start to distrust your own perceptions a little. You can't always remember if you moved something or if you just think you moved it. You're always slightly out of sync with time. It makes you doubt yourself, and someone, apparently, had been counting on exactly that. I called the police that evening. The officer who came out was polite and thorough. He walked through the house with me, looked at everything I showed him, took notes. And then he said the thing I was afraid he'd say, without signs of forced entry, and without knowing for certain that these individuals don't have some claim to access the property. Maybe a key you gave out and forgot, a locksmith visit you don't remember. There's not much I can act on right now. What I can do is file a report. If you want to take this further, get your locks changed today. And if anyone enters again after that, that's criminal trespass and we can move. He wasn't wrong. I understood his position, but I remember standing in my own guest room looking at someone else's phone charger and feeling like the ground under me was made of paper. I changed the locks that night. Drove to a hardware store at 9 p.m. and bought a new deadbolt and a new key dob for the back door and installed them myself. Took about 2 hours. I am not a handyman by nature, but desperation sharpens your focus. Then I ordered 3 security cameras online, 2-day shipping. And I started to think. The thing I kept coming back to was what my neighbor had said, a few weeks. This had been going on for weeks. Whoever was doing this had enough familiarity with my schedule to come and go without running into me. I worked Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday nights. Gone from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. My neighbor had seen cars on weekend nights. That fit. But it also meant someone knew my schedule well enough to use it. That's a short list of people. My supervisor at work obviously knew my schedule. A couple of my coworkers. My daughter knew, roughly. My son knew. My doctor's office had my work hours on file for scheduling purposes. The woman at my bank who'd helped me set up automatic bill pay 3 years ago had asked about my hours. It's a short list, but it's not as short as I would have liked. The cameras arrived Thursday. I mounted them myself. One above the front door, one in the back covering the yard and the back door, one inside the living room pointed at the front hallway. That last one I tucked up on a bookshelf between some old paperbacks so it wasn't immediately visible from the door. I wasn't sure what I expected to catch. Part of me hoped I was wrong about all of it. Part of me hoped the cameras would sit there for 2 weeks and record nothing but my cat walking across the floor. I don't have a cat, incidentally. But you understand what I mean. I worked my 4 nights that week. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. When I came home Sunday morning, I checked the footage before I did anything else. Before I made coffee, before I took my shoes off. Friday night, at 11:47 p.m., the front door opened. I watched it like it was happening to someone else. A key turned in the lock. I could tell from the way the knob moved, slow and deliberate, someone who knew what they were doing. The door swung inward. Two people came in. A man and a woman, both somewhere in their 30s, dressed casually. The man was carrying a paper grocery bag. The woman had a rolling overnight bag. They knew exactly where to go. No hesitation. No looking around. The man went straight to the kitchen. The woman went upstairs. Like they'd done it 100 times. Because they probably had, I sat in my truck in the driveway. I'd taken to parking down the street so nothing would look different. And I watched 3 hours of footage on my phone with my hands shaking enough that I kept dropping the screen. They'd made dinner. Used my stove, my pans, my dishes. Watched TV in my living room. Slept in my guest room. Saturday morning, they left at 9 a.m. The woman carried out a trash bag tied neatly, which she put in my recycling bin on the way out. They were cleaning up after themselves. Whoever had set this up had told them to leave the place exactly as they found it. This was not random. This was organized. I spent 2 days thinking about how to handle it. I thought about waiting outside and confronting them. I thought about calling the police and having them wait with me. I thought about a lot of things. What I kept coming back to was the question I couldn't answer yet. Who gave them a key? Because someone had made a copy of a key to my house. Someone who had access to my original, and I needed to know who that was before I did anything else. Because that person wasn't a stranger who'd stumbled into my life. That person was someone I'd trusted. I called my daughter. I told her what was happening. She wanted to fly out immediately. I told her to hold off, that I had a plan. My plan was simple and it took about a week to execute. I told 2 people at work, casually, in passing, that I was switching to days. Made it sound like I'd requested a schedule change and it had just been approved. I wasn't switching to days. But I wanted to see if anything changed. If whoever was running this operation knew about the schedule change, they'd stop. And if they stopped, I'd know the information was coming from inside my workplace. This was my daughter's suggestion, actually, and it was a good one. Pulled up the last 12 months of my utility bills online. The electric bill, the gas bill, the water bill. They were all higher than they should have been. Not dramatically, not in a way that would have set off alarms, but consistently elevated. My electric bill had been running about $40, sometimes $50 a month over my normal average. Gas was similar. Water usage was up. I'd noticed it vaguely. The way you notice a slow leak. You register it. You think, and then you don't do anything about it because it's not urgent and you're tired and you got other things on your mind. It had been going on for at least 8 months. 8 months. I went back and thought about what had changed 8 months ago. I'd had my back door lock replaced in July. The original was sticking. A locksmith came out and swapped it in about 20 minutes. It had seemed routine. I'd been home the whole time, more or less. I remember I was half asleep on the couch when he finished, and he left the new keys on my kitchen counter. I'd counted them and put them away. 2 keys. But a locksmith has tools. A locksmith could make an impression, or bring the lock out to his truck for a few minutes. Or any number of things I don't know enough about to fully understand. I don't know if that's what happened. I don't know that it was him. What I know is that the timeline fits. 3 days after I mentioned the schedule change to my co-workers, to both of them, separately, on different days, I checked the cameras. Nothing on Friday night. Nothing on Saturday night. Whoever was doing this had gotten the update. I called the police non-emergency line and asked to speak with a detective. I'd been keeping notes, dates, times, screenshots of the camera footage, the utility bill comparisons, all of it, and I walked the detective through everything on the phone. She asked me to email the footage. I did. She said she'd look into it. What happened next took longer than I wanted and shorter than I expected. The detective traced the unauthorized access to a property management app, one of those platforms people use to list short-term rentals, not the biggest one, a smaller one I'd never heard of. Someone had been listing my house on it under a fake profile for 8 months. The listing had a photo of my living room, my kitchen, my guest room. The going rate was between $90 and $120 a night, depending on the weekend. They'd had maybe 40 or 50 bookings, guests who thought they were renting a legitimate short-term rental, guests who had no idea anything was wrong. Most of them probably thought it was just a normal unlisted property hosted by a private owner. The person running the listing was eventually identified. I'm not going to use his name, but I will tell you this: he was not a stranger. He was someone who'd done some handyman work at my house about 2 years before all this started. Before my wife passed, actually back when she was sick and I was trying to keep up with the house repairs on top of everything else. He'd done some drywall work, some painting. Good work, honestly. I'd been grateful at the time. At some point during one of those jobs, he'd made a copy of my key. Maybe he'd had a plan even then. Maybe the plan came later. I don't know. I'll never fully know. And I've had to make a certain kind of peace with that. He was charged with multiple counts of unauthorized use of property and fraud, as well as identity theft for the financial transactions. The detective told me that the total revenue from the fraudulent listing was somewhere in the range of $4,000 to $5,000 over the 8 months. Not a fortune, but enough to be worth it to someone with no conscience and a spare key. Some of the guests contacted the platform once the listing was taken down and they figured out what had happened. A few of them were upset. A couple of them, apparently, left reviews on the platform before it was closed. Positive reviews, because they'd had a fine stay. That detail stuck with me more than it probably should have. I did not sell my house. I almost did. For about 3 weeks after everything came out, I seriously considered it, listed it in my head, thought about what neighborhood I'd move to, whether I'd get a condo or try to find a smaller place. But the house is where my wife and I raised our kids, and I decided I wasn't going to let someone who'd made a copy of my key take that from me on top of everything else. What I did instead, I had a locksmith come out, a different one, someone my detective recommended who does work for the department, and I had every lock in the house replaced, including the deadbolts on the side gate to the backyard. I upgraded the camera system to one with motion alerts that go directly to my phone. I added a video doorbell. I had a smart lock installed on the front door so I can see in real time whether it's locked and who's used it. I also, and this is the one that felt most necessary for some reason, I walked through every room in my house, slowly, by myself on a Sunday afternoon when the light was good. I looked at everything. My wife's photograph still on the hallway wall, the coffee table she'd picked out, the garden beds out back that I still try to keep up. Not as well as she did, but I try. I stood in the middle of my house and I said out loud to no one, "This is mine." I don't know why that helped, but it did. I still work nights, still do 4 on, 3 off. I come home at 6:30 in the morning, and the first thing I do now before coffee, before I even sit down, is check the app on my phone that shows me the camera feeds every single time. And every single time, it shows me my empty living room, my empty kitchen, my empty front porch, my house, empty in the way it's supposed to be empty. I've thought a lot about what made this possible, and I keep coming back to the same answer. I stopped paying attention to the place I lived because I was so focused on surviving it, surviving the loneliness, surviving the routine, surviving getting through the weeks after my wife was gone. I stopped noticing. And something invisible moves into the spaces where you stop noticing. I notice now. I come home in the gray, early morning light, and I let myself in, and I stand just inside the door for a moment before I take off my jacket, and I look at my living room. The blanket on the armchair, tossed over the arm the way I left it. The one mug on the drying rack. The quiet that is mine. It's not a dramatic thing noticing. It's just standing still for 30 seconds and making sure the world is what it should be. I wish it hadn't taken this to teach me that, but it did, and I won't forget it again.